Good afternoon. My name is Lenny Rosolovsky, and I'm an independent researcher. I research climate and climate change, and today I'm going to talk about the upcoming mega greenhouse. Climate change is a very serious issue that has to be addressed immediately. Most of the 1 degree increase in the Earth average temperature since pre-industrial times has occurred since 1980. And most of the increase in atmospheric CO2 from 310 ppm to 410 ppm has occurred since 1950. 75% of fossil fuel burning and anthropogenic CO2 in the atmosphere has occurred since 1970. There is a 93% chance that the temperature increase will exceed 4 degrees by the end of the century, and this is a pretty conservative estimate. Without further commitments and action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the world is likely to warm more than 3 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial climate. Even with the current mitigation commitments and pledges fully implemented, there is roughly a 20% likelihood of exceeding 4 degrees by 2100. If climate goals are not met, a warming of 4 degrees Celsius could occur as early as 1960s. Most projections of global warming focus on the year 2100 and the effects of doubling CO2 from pre-industrial level of 275 ppm to 550 ppm. And the lack of attention to the very long run is a serious shortcoming, since integrated carbon climate models project that if CO2 from the current fossil fuel resources continues to be released into the atmosphere, the peak concentration of atmospheric CO2 could exceed 1400 ppm by the year 2100. This would inevitably lead to severe negative effects on agricultural production. And agriculture will become impossible in the post-Holocene climate. Because with the future climate instability already locked into the system by recent human activity, will most likely return to the climate volatility of the Pleistocene. Climate change will adversely affect agriculture in a number of ways, including sea level rise, high average temperatures, heat extremes, changes in rainfall patterns, and the loss of pollinators. Less understood changes include effects on agricultural pests, soil composition, and the growth response of crops to rising CO2 levels. And agriculture was impossible in the past. During the Pleistocene, there was no conditions for agricultural productions. And now we are returning to the Pleistocene conditions, and hence making the agricultural production impossible. If we look by the year 2050 under a typical middle-of-the-road emission scenario, you're looking at doubling the volatility for grains in mid-latitudes. In places like China, US, Europe, Ukraine, the breadbasket countries of the world, the volatility from year to year, just from natural climate variability, at a higher temperature is going to be much higher. The impact on crops is going to be greater and greater. The ability of agriculture to adapt to climate change will depend on the rapidity of changes as well as their severity. Intensively growing high-tech crops on the massive scale required to support billions more people will be prohibitively expensive just in terms of the energy required. Let's not forget that we use 10 calories of chemical energy to produce 1 calorie of food energy. And this is no longer possible because the use of fossil fuels increases the greenhouse effect and hence negatively affects the agricultural production. Also, as temperature fluctuations will be greater towards the pole, there are already indications of climate instability more than upsetting the average of longer growing seasons in northern regions. For example, although longer summers in Greenland have increased the growing season by 2 weeks, they are becoming drier and rainfall has become more unpredictable. As the temperature rises, the climate patterns will change. Would be in one place we'll have more rainfall, in the other places we'll have more drought, and it takes 10, 15 days of intense heat to kill all crops. Hence we are going into severe agricultural uncertainty. And increasing temperatures will have a devastating effect on agricultural productivity, especially given the sensitivity of grains to temperature extremes. It is estimated that 60% of humans have just 3 grains: maize, rice, and wheat. Modeling indicates that a greater than 90% probability that average growing season temperatures will exceed the most extreme seasonal temperatures recorded between 1900 and 2006 for most of the tropics and subtropics. Climate change will exacerbate social and political instability. It is difficult to establish a direct cause and effect relationship between climate change and social conflict, but the correlations are suggestive. The wars in Darfur in Syria and the massive migration of North Africa have been linked to droughts. The climatologist Michael Mann observed that the Syrian uprising was driven by another drought that was the worst drought on record. The paleo record suggests the worst in 900 years. Drought is a big one, and it's behind a lot of the conflict that we see behind it. As climate change exacerbates, migrations will be driven not only by drought, but also by sea level rise and the inhabitability of much of Southern Africa and Middle East because of extreme temperatures. All this leads to the conclusion that mankind has to get its act together and start forming a new socio-economic paradigm, the eco-civilization. The situation is so dire that it is necessary to create some kind of an extraordinary environmental council which would incorporate all intelligent thinking and ecologically conscious people who would try to somehow prevent this future from happening. And what we need to create an international rescuers group, people of the new civilization who would put climate first. And this organization has to elaborate and create new rules, has to create a way out of our situation. Right now, what we see like Greta Thunberg trying to spread her concerns about the climate, but a lot of people take it with a lot of skepticism and they don't believe in climate change. This has to change. We have to educate people. We have to tell them that the future that is looming ahead can be prevented. But in order to do this, we have to unite And we have to come together and somehow start acting. We have to become ecological and climate conscious. And with that knowledge, with that consciousness, we need to prevent that horrible future from happening. Thank you so much.